Okay, so this video is an introduction to predicting breakaway gaps. In the last video, which was cut off at I believe the second type of gap trading strategy that I mentioned, um, I was going to go into this, so I'm making a separate video for this. Basically, what we're going to be talking about here is how to predict the breakaway gap. Generally, you can't predict gaps that are breakaway or continuation gaps. In other words, you can't predict these gaps with these really high volumes because they tend to be the result of news or earnings reports. Earnings reports, of course, you can predict that a gap might occur, but you can't predict whether it's going to be an area gap, or you can't predict whether it's going to be a gap up or a gap down. So, in that set of gap trading strategies that I discussed in the last video, um, one of them was predicting these breakaway gaps so that you can get in around this time and then benefit after the gap occurs. Now, you can't really do that simply through candlestick analysis. If you look at this breakaway gap on Cisco systems, what you'll see is we actually have a bearish engulfing candlestick, which should predict a downward trend. And indeed, if this breakaway gap didn't occur, you'd have around a 70% probability that actually the gap, that actually the price of Cisco goes down. However, that didn't happen, obviously. So there is some news report that occurred that made this gap occur. Now, how do you predict that? Like I said, the technicals don't really work so well. The fundamentals tell you more or less long-term how a stock might perform, but what really occurs with these gaps is a investor sentiment change due to a news report. Now, what I was saying in the last video before I was cut off was a good place to check out the news for each stock is marketwatch.com, simply because it is more or less an aggregate. MarketWatch, it's more or less an aggregate of all of the other news sources, and it separates the news for a certain stock into categories. So you just go to MarketWatch, go to whatever stock ticker you want. It should come up, and you'll see the news sources on the right here. MarketWatch news on. So this is all directly related to Cisco. And you might find the reason for that gap. Actually, it should be a few days back. I'm not going to dig through. You can do that yourself if you're interested. Then there's other news that's typically related to the industry that the stock you're looking at is in. Finally, you've got press releases that usually come directly from the company itself. Now, these are all kind of lagging indicators of that breakaway gap. So it's not useful so much in predicting the breakaway gap, though it can sometimes give you some information as to whether something's going to occur in the future. For example, you notice here how, okay, right now it's March 2nd. So you notice here how the last news article was February 27th, and maybe every week or so something happens. But then we saw on the 17th and the 18th and the 20th, those three news reports were they kind of piled up in a shorter period than seems to be normal for Cisco. So that might imply something coming after the 20th. Now, do we see anything interesting after the 20th? Looks like not, but that might have been an indicator. So the frequency of the news reports you see at MarketWatch might be important, but these tend to be lagging indicators. So a better place to check for whether something might be occurring to a stock is message boards, because now we're not looking at the news. We're looking at gossip. We're looking at rumors, things that might occur. Some of these rumors might be true. If they are true and you get in on the stock, and especially for penny stocks, that stock might rally and you might have a huge breakaway gap and a huge amount of profit. For my penny stock subscription service, I often use these message boards to find rumors and then look into them and see if there's any basis behind them. And if there is, I believe the stock will have an upward breakaway gap, I will make the recommendation to my readers. I'll give you a couple examples of some of the breakaway gaps that I predicted correctly in my penny stock trading service. One is this stock by the name of Gene. We got in right before the breakaway gap due to, I'll show you the breakaway gap. We got in right before. I predicted it on the January 28th based on rumors. So I told them in the morning of January 29th before the stock market opened, get in on this stock. If they bought at the opening price, they would have bought at a little more than $1. It rose all the way up to 11 bucks at one point. And this is something that actually you can do simply by digging through the news, digging through rumors. And where do you find those rumors? There are two good places. I typically use Yahoo message boards, and then you type in the stock. So Cisco. So there you go. That's the first message board. The second one I use, if I don't find enough information there, it depends on the stock. For penny stocks, a lot of the time, Yahoo doesn't really discuss them as much. So you want to go to a place called Investor Hub. Then type that stock ticker. And there you go. So those are two really good places to dig into the rumors. If you find something that you believe could make a breakaway gap, in other words, a piece of good news, it could be earnings reports, it could be a new product being released, it could be switching of management, hiring a better CEO. Dig into the facts behind that. Make sure it's not just a rumor, but something that seems factually correct but has no news yet on MarketWatch. Because if the news is already on MarketWatch, what's happening is that news, that rumor is already reflected in the price of the stock, so it's useless. So you want to find something that MarketWatch has not pointed out yet, but the message boards have pointed out. If you can find that in time, you can get this kind of profit from predicting those breakaway gaps. If you have any questions on breakaway gaps, please leave them in the comments. Like I said, the last video got cut off. I actually was outlining 3 different gap trading strategies. This was the second of which. So I'm going to give another video in the future that follows up from that video that got cut off. Until then, leave me some comments and go ahead and go to my website to get a free guide on gap trading.